One of the things that I get asked the most about is how do I mount my paper onto my cradled wood panels. I like to do this for my drawings because I think it gives them a more finished look overall, and I enjoy being able to put them directly on my walls instead of having to frame them and keep them behind glass. So here's the process. For this project, I use 3M Super 77 spray adhesive, but you can use another if you prefer. Look for something that adheres well to wood and has an even spray. I also use Krylon Clear Matte Fixing Spray. Again, the brand you use is your choice, and this step is actually optional. You're just looking for something that will create a moisture barrier to help protect your paper from your adhesive. When using aerosols, protection is very important. I've used several forms of masks, but this 3M Quick Latch Respirator has been my favorite. My rule of thumb is that if you can smell what you're spraying, then you're still breathing it in and need a better mask. My paper of choice is Strathmore Grey Tone Sketch Paper. I've tried this process with their thicker mixed media paper and had issues with it lifting, so I'd advise to either stick with thinner paper or look for a stronger adhesive. Finally, for my cradled wood panels, I use US Art Supply panels, though I've used Arteza as well. I paint the backs and the sides of the panels, leaving the front plain as it will be covered by my paper. In this case, I used a custom paint made by Sherwin to match my grey Strathmore paper. I'll add the paint mix in the description, but I recommend getting your own colour match for best results. To set up, I secured my paper using doubled over washi tape in a lined cardboard box to better control my sprays. At this point, you use your sealing spray of choice to apply an even coat. Again, this step is optional, and it's simply to better protect your paper from water damage by preventing your adhesive from being absorbed, which might cause bubbling. Before applying your adhesive spray, always check and clean your nozzle for any dried glue that might block your sprayer. It's also not a bad idea to do some quick test sprays to clear out any remaining gunk. Once you've cleared your nozzle, apply an even coat of your adhesive to the back of your paper. Now, the next steps of attaching your paper to your panel change depending on their respective sizes. I recommend using paper that's larger than your panels, but I've included instructions to help if your paper is the same or similar size of your panels. For larger paper, simply take your panel and press it into the adhesive-coated back of your paper. Because we're going to be cutting your paper to size at the end, it doesn't have to be fully centered, but do try to leave a gap from the edges and give yourself plenty of room to work. If your paper is the same size as your panel, or you need to ensure that the edges line up, you can create a squaring tool to help. Use 2 blocks or other items with perfectly flat sides to create a 90-degree angle. It's extremely important that they don't move and that there's no gap between the blocks and the table that the paper can slip under, so you will need clamps to hold them in place. If you don't have clamps, look for a counter that's up against a wall with a surface big enough for your paper, and use that corner as your square. Whatever you end up using, try to ensure that it has at least a few centimeters of height and a smooth edge that you can use to guide your panel down before it hits your table. Once your blocks are in place, you should test to make sure the square you've created works with your panel and that the edges are flush on both sides. Take paper that's been sprayed with adhesive and place it gently in the square, sticky side up. When you're squaring it, try to only touch the paper's edges to avoid getting glue on your fingers, and be careful to keep it from slipping under your blocks. Now grab your panel and line it up to your corner while keeping a gap between it and the paper. Make sure that it's completely squared before moving down and pressing it lightly into the adhesive. Turn your panel over to check to make sure you're happy with your edges. If you're not happy, depending on what paper and adhesive you're using, you may be able to reposition it, but be careful as the paper might tear or bend if pulled too hard. Once you've got your paper positioned, you're ready to press it. I like to use a board for this for better weight distribution, but if you don't have one, that's okay. You just want constant, even pressure across the panel, and you can get that by either placing something heavy on the back or by using your clamps again. This board is actually from an old IKEA drawer, and they're especially helpful if I'm pressing multiple panels because I'll use them as dividers, but since this second one is so small, I'll just place some weights on top. The adhesive you used will determine how long it needs to dry, but once you're satisfied that your glue has dried, it's time to trim off any excess paper from the edges. Place your panel paper side down on a cutting mat and use a blade to trace along the edges of your panel, cutting off anything that hangs over. Make sure to apply enough pressure to cut through the paper fully, and don't worry if you accidentally nick the sides and scratch the paint. You can always retouch it later. Just try not to gouge the wood. And there you have it, paper mounted on a cradled wood board. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I hope this helps.